It seemed to be a law of nature. Students, however lethargic they might be, came back to life once class was over. Just a few moments ago, faces had stared blankly at laptop screens, probably thinking the teacher didn't know they were looking through Facebook and not taking notes. Others had glanced out of the window into the park connecting the different buildings of the university, longing to be out there in the sun. A precious few, however, were actually listening and taking notes, showing an honest interest in what Jonathan had to say. Yet, even those rose from their seats quite quickly as soon as the commotion started. Laptops were shoved into bags, chairs snapped upwards against the wooden rows of the classroom, and the fastest students were already pouring down the stairs on each side, eager to reach the door. There won't be class in the coming week, but for the next time, please read page 127 to page 150 in your textbooks. We'll talk about the origins of the vampire myth in Eastern European culture, and I'd like you to... Oh, whatever. It's not like any of you are listening. Jonathan snorted as the background noise of dozens of chit-chats drowned him out. He began packing his things. Which page was that, Mr. Harker? As he looked up, he found Cecilia Jenkins in front of his desk. She held her notebook in hand and a pen set to write down the pages they were supposed to read. Jonathan noticed, too, that she had opened another button of her blouse. Usually that wasn't something he'd pay attention to, but Celia was his best student, always eager, always prepared, always in the front row, and so obviously infatuated with him. 127 to 150. Thank you, she wrote it down. That was a great class. Glad you think so. She turned around to get her bag, but then stopped. Say, there's this new play about vampires in the West End. I have tickets for Friday, but my friend bailed out, and I was wondering, would you... Sorry, I can't, Jonathan interrupted her, sincerely hoping that she didn't have the tickets yet, or that she could give them back. No matter how obvious her story about the friend was, Celia was still a student, and tickets in the West End didn't come cheap. I'm not even in the country, he quickly added as he saw her face. I'll be in Romania with Professor Altman. Oh, of course. I hope you have a great time then. Thanks, Celia. On her way out, Celia almost bumped into Keith, who just entered the classroom. She dropped her notebook, which he gave back to her, accompanied by his most charming smile, one that Jonathan knew only too well. Unless you want me to write my number in first, he smirked, not letting go of the notebook just yet. Cut it out, Keith. She's too good for you, Jonathan grinned deviously. Don't fall for his antics, Celia. You can do better than him. The young woman blushed a little and made off as fast as possible. I beg your pardon. Too good for me. Keith came around the desk, hopped onto it, and pulled Jonathan closer, maneuvering him between his legs and kissing him on the lips. Jonathan snorted and pushed Keith away, though not as rigorously as one might have expected given such behavior. Oh, are you too good for me too, now? You know I am, Jonathan finished picking up his stuff. You sassy bitch, Keith groaned affectionately. He was toying with a pencil and started drawing a cock on the desk. Jonathan couldn't help but smirk. Keith would never change, and that was partly the reason their relationship hadn't lasted. A charming, handsome bloke, definitely, but Keith was also as unreliable as he was flirtatious. It had come as a surprise to no one more than Jonathan that they had become much better after their breakup. With the weight of the relationship out of the way, they had become fast friends. Friends with benefits, that was, since their sexual chemistry was undeniable. Want to grab a bite? I have the afternoon off. Would love to, but I need to go see Altman. Unless you want to wait. Sharing you with the old fart again, eh? What does he have that I don't? An open position as scientific assistant? Keith made a farting noise, but nodded. I'll be outside in the real world, clever boy. Don't make me wait too long, or I might find another plaything. Heaven forbid, Jonathan grunted teasingly. Keith thought it was a joking matter, but Jonathan really wanted this job badly. Professor Altman was almost a living stereotype, chaotic, slightly confused, but very caring towards his students. Jonathan had quickly become his favorite, a role that he hadn't embraced eagerly at first, but Altman had grown on him over time. Altman had offered him the position as supply teacher, and had since then continued to build Jonathan's reputation as his protege. As Jonathan turned around the corner to Altman's office, he stopped. There was a bloke in the hallway, standing next to a window and talking on his mobile. Jonathan was used to all kinds of strange characters populating the campus, but this guy really stood out. He was at least 6 foot high, wore a tight black muscle shirt and form-fitting jeans. He was ruggedly handsome with a well-groomed beard and piercing, oddly colored eyes. They probably were honey-colored, but the light made them seem orange, almost yellow as it reflected off them. His massive arms were covered in tribal tattoos, which went all the way up his broad shoulders. Jonathan considered tribals cheap and tacky, but on this guy they seemed oddly appropriate. Want to take a picture? It'll last longer. The deep, almost growling voice woke Jonathan from his bewilderment. He realized he had been staring, and the man had put away his mobile. Oh, may I? Despite his surprise, Jonathan reacted quickly. He wasn't one to be flustered too easily. Cheeky. I like it, the other replied to Jonathan's relief. Sometimes he spoke faster than he thought, and for a moment he had been concerned that flirting with a buff guy like this could be real mean a black eye, or worse. However, it appeared that Mr. Tattoo was okay with it. Are you lost? These hallways can be quite confusing. No worries, I'm fine. The man smirked and turned to go. You're welcome, Jonathan watched as he left down the hallway. He couldn't help but notice how well the guy filled out his jeans. Bloody hell, nice arse, he muttered under his breath when he was sure the distance between them was big enough. Thanks, the man winked at him over his shoulder. Jonathan stopped. His flabbergasted expression garnered him a mischievous grin from the object of his admiration. How the hell had he been able to hear that? Jonathan, my boy, I thought you heard your voice. Come in. Professor Altman's appearance in the door of his office prevented Jonathan from dwelling on the matter any further. He looked back down the alley. But the man was gone, so Jonathan entered the office. Who was that, Professor? Who? The man who just left. Huge, muscular, tattooed. He was standing right here in front of your door. Thought maybe you had an appointment with you. Oh, Mr. Ionescu. He will be our guide in Romania. He speaks the local tongue, and he knows the lay of the land, as you say. Sit down, my boy. You must want some tea. The professor wandered off into the kitchen without waiting for an answer. Yes, please. Jonathan sat down in front of the professor's desk. A guide. So he'd bump into huge, tattooed, and hunky again. Soon. Not the worst prospect. He definitely had flirted back, no doubt about it. Milk? The professor's question drew Jonathan back out of his daydreams about the hunky stranger. Yes, thank you. 1 lump or 2? 2, please. Jonathan liked it sweet. Sugar? What? Jonathan blinked. Professor Altman returned with 2 cups and set one down in front of Jonathan. The smell of black tea filled the room. He then took his place behind his desk, folding his hands over his beige button-down shirt, which, as Jonathan noticed, wasn't buttoned properly. Altman used to say that he was lost without his wife. Obviously, she'd been out when he had gotten dressed. You wanted to speak to me? Did I? Professor Altman studied Jonathan's face, seemingly looking for the reason he had asked him here. Oh, yes. Jonathan smiled fondly. He enjoyed these moments of awkwardness. Yes, I wanted to give you this, my boy. He rummaged through the mess of papers and books on his desk, almost toppling over his teacup until he found an envelope. He held it out towards Jonathan, who took it and opened it. The plane ticket, thank you, Professor, and a train ticket. Vienna to Brasov. Professor, is that correct? Of course, my boy. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Couldn't we just fly all the way and miss out on an adventure? Jonathan, this isn't a trip you take with something as mundane as a plane. You need to take in the atmosphere, the landscape. If I could, I would have bought us seats on a steam train. Oh, imagine that. Imagine traveling as in the 19th century, Jonathan thought. Well, this is Professor Altman for you. He took another look at the tickets. Wait, those are first class. Of course, my boy. Professor, I can't afford to pay for first-class tickets. There was no... A loud noise interrupted him. Oh, I left the kettle on. Altman returned to his kitchen. Professor! Yes, what is it, my boy? The tickets. What about them? They're too expensive. Oh, don't worry. All expenses are covered. What? Professor returned, looking pleased. We're funded now. We are? Yes. The benevolent soul wants to remain anonymous, but the dean couldn't be happier than an annoying little man. Usually he's the thorn on my side, but this time he can't complain about money being wasted, and he seemed to realize he was rambling and quickly shrugged. So don't you worry about a little luxury. A moment of awkward silence followed. Was there something else, my boy? No. Don't you have things to do, then? Why are you wasting your time with an old man? Go outside, the sun is shining. You asked me here, Professor. Did I? Oh, of course I did. But now, shoo, I don't want to steal more of your time. My boy, it's precious. Time, that is. Yes, time is precious. When Jonathan found himself outside the office again, the envelope in his hand, he realized he hadn't even touched the tea. He shook his head with a smirk, shoved the ticket into his messenger bag, and left the building. Outside in the bright sunlight Professor Altman had mentioned, Jonathan took a deep breath. He was a bit anxious. A trip to Romania wasn't something you went on every day, and he wasn't the only one running for the position of scientific assistant. Still, it promised to be a journey not easily forgotten.